Thanks so much. And next up, we have Nigel Rogers. Excuse me. Oh, I'm a little tired. Nigel Roberts from .gg. Come on up, Nigel.
Thank you. Thank you. Is it working? I can't hear it. Never mind. Thank you, Tess. You're not the only person to make that mistake. The Vice Chancellor of the university did that a couple of years ago. Tess, it's not on. Closer. Oh, okay. That's much better. Okay, so let me take my hat off. I'm Nigel Roberts. You probably all know me from .gg. We're not going to talk too much about pitching domain names today. We're going to talk about names and a little bit of history. So this is the entertainment. I'm the warm-up act. The main event is going to be Richard, who's coming on in a second. But we're going to talk a little bit about games and gamers and the magic of names. Okay, so who knows who these two characters are? And more to the point, what do they have in common? Anyone going to suggest that? You put your hand up? Or are you just yawning? Okay, well, I'll cut this short. They're both the hero in The Monomyth by Joseph Campbell. Okay, and names are very important in myth. So let me talk about these two guys for a second. That's me, believe it or not, in 1978. And this is my special guest, Richard Bartle, Emeritus Professor of Computer Game Design at the University of Essex. When I talk to people about my friends, I say I got a friend with one of the coolest titles ever. So, a quick bit of history as to how we know each other. That's the hero's journey. I should have put that up earlier. This is about names. You all know about names? Because the name is the thing. Ursula Le Guin. A long speech that Gandalf made. Wie gut, dass niemand heißt, dass ich Rumpelstiltskin heiß. Names play a really important part in that particular fairy tale. It's a me, Mario. His name's very important. And it ain't what you call you, it's what you answer to. This picture is where the first, I call it the first, though a little bit of dispute about that, the first multi-user computer game was ever developed. On this teletype here on the right. Mostly by a guy called Roy Trubshaw, who was a colleague of Richard and mine at the university. And I met Richard about a week after that happened, and he took it from there. The history is all on the internet, more than you could ever want. And we had our own two towers. That was all developed just up there in the top right-hand corner at the University of Essex. The names of these guys are Eddington, Burton, Russell. That's just what the towers are called. So with that brief and very short introduction in mind, let me introduce Emeritus Professor of Computer Game Design, Dr. Richard Bartle. With a great font.
Right, so when I was at school, I was my summer job was a bingo caller, so I know how to hold a microphone so you can hear me. Okay, so the brief I was given for this talk was to talk about names and computer games. I don't know if that's what you're expecting me to talk about, but that's what I'm going to talk about. So I've been involved in games since before there was a games industry, as Nigel alluded to there. And names are important for games. They're important for the developers who make the games. They're important for the games that they make. and they're also important for things that are in games. So if you're interested in names, and I kind of think some of you will be, then at least you might be worth knowing about how computer games come about using their names. So developers, these are the people who actually make the games. They need a name for their company or their studio. And this is the brand. They're going to be putting it on all their games. So they want something that's kind of generic but carries the vibe that they want to convey to their player base. And it's absolutely critical. If they don't get it right, then no one's going to be buying their games because they'll think the company sucks because its name sucks. They're probably right as well. But the names that they're choosing are getting longer and longer and weirder and weirder. And some of them are getting long and weird at the same time. They're getting longer because they put words at the end of the game, the studio that they want to call it. So they put the word games, or they put the word entertainment, or they put the word studio or studios at the end of their game name, the name they actually want to be called. They're getting weirder because the developers themselves are getting weirder, and all the best names are probably being taken. Now, the United Kingdom, what's the something industry, well anyway, this is basically the trade group for the UK games industry. It's UKI, we all call it. That's why I don't remember what the I and the E stand for. Probably the E's entertainment. Anyway, it lists over 2,000 UK games industries. It's a bit out of date. I don't think it was updated this year yet. The last 10 startups that it lists are Panda Cat Games, Republic Games, Serious Point Games, Kindred Spirit Games, Game Source Entertainment, Parable Studios, Inferno Studios, Dubious Design, Tickle or Tilk or something, Tilky AI, and Dead Genetic. So you can see, if you want to call yourself Panda Cat, and you find that someone's already registered Panda Cat as a domain name or as a company, well, you just call yourself Panda Cat Games, and there you are. Now, there is some reason that they do this. It's not just out of nothing. Because your new company is going to need a web or at least an internet presence, even if people are just going to send you emails. And you're going to have to get a domain name before you set up the company. Because if you set up the company and then the domain name, whoever owns the domain name has got you over a barrel. So they don't want that. What they want is a name that they can register for cheap that is the name of their company. But buying a snappy domain name is going to cost them a lot of money. Because if you haven't set up your startup, if you haven't yet started up, you don't have any money. So they want something they can get cheap, that they're not going to be buying from someone who already owns it. They're just going to be buying it straight off the bat. So they're going to go for something long or something weird. And if the name that they've got is gone, they're going to stick entertainment or studios or games or anything else after it. Play, lots of things they can stick after it just to make it so that the name's not being taken. And if it has been taken, they won't buy it because they can't afford it. So that's pretty well the bind they're in. Now, companies want names that are unique. So if someone's already thought of the name, then clearly that's not unique because someone's already thought of it. But nevertheless, it might be a really cool name and they really want it. So they'll append the words to make the name unique, but they'll only use the non-unique part day to day. So the company that makes World of Warcraft, Blizzard, it's not called Blizzard, it's called Blizzard Entertainment. But everyone calls it Blizzard. Likewise, that earlier one, Panda Cat Games, no one's going to call it Panda Cat Games, they're going to call it Panda Cat. It's just for the web presence or for the internet presence that they're going to need that extra word at the end. Of course, Blizzard has so much money they could actually buy Blizzard by the end. It probably bought it at the beginning anyway, because they're quite old. They also use acronyms. So they've got a full title that's quite long, and then refer to themselves by the acronym rather than by the full title. So my first startup was named Multi-User Entertainments Limited, but it actually called Muse. Everybody called it Muse. It said Muse on our letterhead with Multi-User Entertainment Limited underneath it, but it was only ever called Muse. But we were never going to be able to afford to buy muse.com or muse.co.uk. In fact, I'm not entirely sure you could buy that when we started it up in '85. But anyway, having a long name and then abbreviating it is another trick that they like to play. Now, games. You can't copyright book titles. If you bring out a book title and it's the same as someone else's book title, well, you're allowed to do that. It's the same with games. You can bring out a game with the same name as another game. However, there are trademarks and passing off laws. So if someone's trademarked the name, you probably can't use it. And if you're trying to pass off what you've written as if it was by somebody else, again, you probably can't do it. So if you wanted to create a game about farms, you're probably fine calling it farm, 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 farm. And if someone's already registered that, add another farm to the end. If you wanted to call it Farmopoly, and everyone knows that that's going to be based on Monopoly, but there's lots of Opoly games out there, you're probably okay calling it Farmopoly unless someone else has already done that. If you decide to call it Farm Theft Auto, well, now it's starting to sound a bit like it's Grand Theft Auto, and that could be quite litigious because somebody's going to be thinking, yeah, trying to pass off your game as having some connection with Grand Theft Auto, and it has none. So give us all your money. And if you were to call it Farmville, well, there already is a game called Farmville. It's got all kinds of legal protections around it. And if you called your game Farmville, you will be sued to death. Now, ways to make the names of games. So you've got your company name, your developer's name. What are you going to call your game? Because it's quite useful if you've got a presence for the game that you're making. If you've got a suite of games, you'll probably want several of them. So this is from a book, 2014, Scott Rogers. He listed ways to think of names in games, and these are the main ways. First one, it's a literal title, easy to work out. It just says what it does. May be named after the main character, maybe named after a location, or something else to do with the game. I mean, the main character would be something like Sonic the Hedgehog. That's just the name of the game because that's who's in it. Main location, Castle Wolfenstein. That's where it's set. Or it could be named after some gameplay activity. Command and Conquer. What do you do in this game? Well, you command and conquer. Oh, okay. So it's pretty well literal. It just does what it says. Another way of doing it is an action title or a cool title that captures the vibes of the game, the spirit of the game, but it doesn't mention the content of the game. So something like Darksiders, Brutal Legend, Gears of War. It tells you what the game's about, how it feels. It doesn't tell you about the game itself very much. I mean, you can tell that Gears of War is not going to be about knitting, but you don't know what it's going to be about. Is it contemporary warfare? Is it World War II, World War I, Napoleonic? Who knows? Another way, punny titles. These are where they create a game with a name that is trying to make you think, well, the designers of this are clever because they've thought of a clever name. System Shock, Half-Life, Dead Space. Normally, people would associate puns with being funny, but that's not the aim here. The aim here is to have a title that people will think, aha, yes, you're clever because Half-Life, I mean, that's to do with radioactivity and stuff, but Half-Life, meaning how long you're going to live before you die. Again, this is something it's a pun, and the idea is to make players think that the developers are clever. Purple cow titles. these are one that the game's got a name and the player's thinking, why the hell's it called that? So they want to look just to find out what the game's about because it's got a weird title. Just take a couple of unconnected words, stick them together, call that your game. But it's better if there's an actual connection between that and the gameplay. So Little Big Planet, Resident Evil, Naughty Bear, those are names of games. Why is it called Resident Evil? I know what resident means. I know what evil means. Resident Evil, that means something's going to be living around that's evil. So you play the game to find out, or at least you look up the game to find out about it. These kind of titles stand out, and they give off a lot of atmosphere. The trouble is that it might be negative. You don't know when you create it whether it's going to be positive or negative. If you see Little Big Planet, you think, is that good or bad? Well, back in the 60s, there was a TV program called Little Big Time on the television. It was run by Freddie and the Dreamers. I mean, it was a weird thing. If you remember that, then you might think of it positively. But if you remember some other Little Big something or other, you might think of it negatively. And if you haven't heard of either of them, then that's the people they're probably aiming at. Dramatic titles. These are the ones that they give you that sound like movie titles. They're talking about its theme rather than individual characters or actors and actions or anything in it. So, The Sum of All Fears, The Suffering of Isaac, The Last of Us. As I note there, they do usually start with the. I was once told that I wrote a book in 2003 called Designing Virtual Worlds. Sold about 15,000 copies. And I wanted to call it The Design of Virtual Worlds, but the publisher said, no, nothing with the at the start of the title ever sells. I thought, oh, well, that explains why the Bible and the Quran are quite low down on the list. But anyway, the is pretty good to stick at the front of something that's dramatic like this. Referential titles refer to something in the game, but not just flat out, that would be literal. It's something that you don't actually fully appreciate until you play the game. So, Halo, Unreal, Portal, Spore. I mean, Halo, you think Halo, what's that? Oh, it's a little thing over someone's head. It's not some vast circular space weapon, but that's what it is in the game. So these are ones where you appreciate the intelligence of the title as you're playing it, and then you'll tell your friends how good it is because they're related. Logos, which all games want, are best with shorter titles. So long titles like The Suffering of Isaac, you're not going to get a great logo with that. They want short titles. And of course, there's a problem with short titles. There aren't many of them. I remember back in the 80s, there was he was a computer scientist, and he was asked, what's the biggest problem facing computer science today? And he said, well, the biggest problem is there's only 17,500 three-letter acronyms. And that's the problem here. The shorter the game name, greater the chance someone's already taken it. Colons. Game names can be expanded using colons. So you think of one title and then you put a colon, then you put something else. Academic papers do this the whole time. They've always got a colon in the title. So they can combine, they don't have to, but they can combine two different types of title together to make one bigger title. It'll normally be referred to by one or the other. So, big hit this year, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. People call it Expedition 33. Its full title is Clair Obscur, pronounced with a French accent. Expedition 33, also pronounced with a French accent. But people only call it by the Expedition 33, even though it's got a longer name. And often when you get the colons, it's to expand an existing series. Batman, Arkham Asylum, Batman Arkham City, Batman Origins, Batman Knight. So it's often to extend an existing series so that people know that this game is a continuation of something else. But modern series don't always bother with the colon. So God of War Ragnarok doesn't have a colon. Assassin's Creed Shadows doesn't have a colon. Before Assassin's Creed Shadows, they did have colons, and then they took the colons out because you can't put colons in URLs. Now, names of things inside games. Many games have got things in them that need to be named. Some of these will be associated strongly with the games. Most of them won't be. So characters, countries, different kinds of magic, spells, whatever. The creatures that live there, the quests that you follow. Some role-playing games require hundreds of these names. The main lore characters, that is the ones that are important to the story or to the history of the game, they will usually have some meaning to them. So people won't just be called Fred. They'll have a name that's associated with their rank or their position. Now, even though they want the characters to have some meaning to their name, they're not always subtle about it. So out of World of Warcraft, there's a guy called Malfurion Stormrage. Now, no one's going to call their kid Malfurion Stormrage. What are you calling your son, Mrs. Stormrage? I'm thinking of calling him Malfurion. No, these are names that have been given to them. Names like Joanna Proudmoore. I mean, someone with the surname Proudmoore, you know they're not a baddie. You know they might have some foibles, but you know they're not a baddie. So they try to give names that are somehow indicative of the connection, a bit like Charles Dickens used to do. But other names, well, if you've got hundreds of characters, pretty soon you run out of names. There's one in a recurrent character in World of Warcraft called Hemit Nessingwary. Why is he called Hemit Nessingwary? Well, he's a hunter. So they just took the name of a hunter, Ernest Hemingway, made an anagram of it and called him Hemit Nessingwary. So that isn't even in, I mean, it makes no sense within the lore of the game, but nevertheless, that's the name they chose for the character. It breaks you out of immersion, but then the graphics do that in World of Warcraft. So if you've got a junior game designer who has to think of a bunch of names, they're going to run out quite quickly. So what do? Well, they end up ripping off pop culture. They pass them off as Easter eggs. Easter eggs are supposed to be these little hidden things that you find in a game, and you think, oh, that's clever. They're making a reference to whatever. But these are industrial scale. Loads of characters or anything else named with a reference to something in the real world that they're passing off as being an Easter egg, but actually it's a sign of lack of imagination. So there's a game called Tibia, and it's got a shopkeeper whose name's Aldi, like Aldi, the shop. There's a bear in Blade and Soul whose name's Yogi, as in Yogi Bear, which itself was ripped off from was it a baseball player or something, Yogi Berra? Final Fantasy series have recurrent characters called Biggs and Wedge. Red Wings they are. Biggs and Wedge were the names of the characters in Red Wing alongside Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. And Biggs and Wedge just occur all throughout the Final Fantasy series. Some of the connections they make, I mean, they really throw a lot of effort at it. Wizard 101, it's got a guy called Page Jimmy. Well, he's called Jimmy, he's a page. He's in Abbey Road, and he wants his axe, which is a lesser Paul. So yeah, Jimmy Page, Abbey Road recording studio, axe a name for a guitar, a Les Paul is a guitar. I mean, they really threw everything at it there. Although whether anybody who plays Wizard 101, which is for kids, actually appreciates that. I don't think they probably would. Now, senior game designers don't do this kind of thing because they know it's unimmersive. If people are playing a game and every time they come across a character name, they've got to figure out what weird aspect of reality it's referencing. So what they do is they write name generation programs and they use the output from them. Some companies do that for the names of the company. There was a company called Kesmai, Kesmai. The name came from a text generation program that one of the people there wrote, Kelton Flynn. So what you say is, this is a language, that these are the elves. The elves have got lots of L's and F's and O's and things in their names. These are the kind of syllables that they're going to be having frequently. DEF, NMN, things weird, that sounds vaguely elvish. And then you've got the dwarfs. They'll have ones with CHs and things like that in them because they all speak with a Scottish accent. And then there's the German ones, and you just say, well, they've got 18 syllables to them. And from this, you run the program and it generates a series of names, and you pick out the ones that you think, that works. If you really want to be keen, then you create an actual language and give meaning to the names within the language. But the players, some of them would appreciate that, but most weren't, so the return on that's not great. If you want to have extra effect, you can stick in apostrophes or other punctuation marks in names just to make them look a bit exotic. All the dragons have an X in their name. Lands, organization, and types of creatures, these tend to be played straight. Game designers don't usually give them strangely punning names or references to other countries. You don't find them countries called Francia in games, not unless they really mean France but don't want to get sued by France. These are often pretty bland, but they're not being played for laughs, so it doesn't matter. Quests, though, are another matter. So quests, these are missions that your characters are given in role-playing games. So your mission is to go and destroy this radio installation or something. Now, quests have all got to have names. The reason they've got to have names is so that cheats can look up how to do them on the internet. So they've got to know what it is that they're looking up to, what it is they're trying to find the solution to. So you've got to name all your quests. World of Warcraft has over 40,000 quests. All of them have got names. So you can see why someone who is creating a quest might be desperate to give it a name, because there's 40,000 of them out there already. I mean, I can imagine it takes them longer to think of the name than it does to think of the quest. So they're terrible. They're full of bad puns, full of references to wider cultures, full of in-jokes, mentions of people who are working on the game at the time. Occasionally, they're actual descriptions. These are some out of World of Warcraft. This is just the first few that I came across when I looked them up. There are thousands of these. Are we there, Yeti? What the flux? Mission possible but not probable. You're fired. Junk in my trunk. You can see where they're just taking sayings or catchphrases and just modifying them, or not even modifying them at all. Talk to the Hand, Stranger in a Strange Land, that's a book. Assassinate Creed. Well, you're going to assassinate somebody, let's call him Creed, and then we can make a bad pun on Assassin's Creed. There's a library of Alex Strasser. Alex Strasser's a dragon, but it sounds a bit like Alexandria, so let's call it the Library of Alex Strasser. Helm's Deep, straight out of Lord of the Rings, but it's about a buried helmet. And this is, I mean, World of Warcraft's probably the worst because it's got the most quests, but this sort of thing you find in many, many games. Spells. Spells in fantasy games also need names, but they got to sound cool. You don't want a spell that doesn't sound cool. You want it to be sound like powerful, so that people who are using it feel powerful because the spell sounds powerful. So they often bear only a superficial similarity to what they do. They think of the cool name, and then the spell does something that might be in line with it, maybe isn't. The Secret World, one of my favorite MMOs, there's a spell there called Exsanguinate. I mean, what a great name. It sucks the blood out of your opponent. And when you use Exsanguinate, you can see this red blood coming out of your opponent into your hands. Great name. Now, I can see how that would work for creatures. I could see how it might work for a plant, maybe sucking the sap out of a plant. For robots, maybe like sucking the oil out of a robot or something. But it also works on rock monsters.